evening, students. I hope you all are doing good and I hope your preparation is going fine. Welcome to today's Analyst. This is 30th of August 2023 and we are here to discuss important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. Now let us go through the table of contents. The first topic of today is India-China border issues, which is in the Indian Express, page number 1. The second topic is related to the doctrine of basic structure and what has been its evolution so far. The third topic is related to gig economy and gig workers and platform workers. The fourth topic is related to the trade restrictions. And the fifth and the last topic is related to your Election Commission of India. Now coming to the first topic of today, why it is important is because in our GS paper 2, India and its neighborhood relations have been clearly mentioned, because of which India-China border issues becomes a very important issue for us to discuss and to know. So coming to the context of the topic. See, recently China has basically produced a new map of its country, which has included the areas of Arunachal Pradesh and also Aksai Chin. And India has lodged a very loud protest against this map. So now coming to the issue that what all are the border issues between India and China. Now let us try to understand this with the help of maps. See, India and China are having three border issues in three sectors. First is the western sector, second is the middle sector, and third is the easternmost sector. Now this area in red composes of your western sector. This area in yellow composes of your middle sector, and this area in blue composes of your eastern sector. Now in western sector comes up your area of Aksai Chin. So this is the area of your Aksai Chin, and it is close to 2100 kilometers of border line in the western sector, and it differs over the boundary that separates Jammu and Kashmir from the Xinjiang province of China. Now, what has happened is that in 1962 war, there was a fierce fighting between the armies of the two countries in this area only, that is in the western sector. And there have been tense standoffs from time and again in this sector. Now coming to the middle sector, it is close to 625 kilometer. And it is close to the state of Uttarakhand of our country. And the 625 kilometer borderline in this sector is more or less tension free. So there have been very less disagreements over this area between India and China. But the main disagreements are in the eastern sector, which constitutes the part of your Arunachal Pradesh. Now here, China has been claiming a very large part, close to 85,000 square kilometer of the area of Arunachal Pradesh. And the two sides have fought fiercely in 1962 in this area as well. So the 1962 war between India and China was fought in the western sector here and also in the eastern sector near the Arunachal Pradesh. Now if you want to know, this is the area of Aksai Chin and this is the area of Arunachal Pradesh which China is claiming. Now coming to the McMahon line issue. Now, there is a line or the border which divides the China and Indian boundary. That line is known as McMahon line. So, the disputed boundary in the eastern sector is the McMahon line. Now, what happened in 1913 to 1914? The representatives of China, India and Tibet, they met in Shimla. Now, they met for a conference to decide the border between India, China and Tibet. Now, Sir McMahon was the Foreign Secretary of British during that point in time. And he drew a 890-kilometer line border between British India and the Tibet Autonomous Region. So, the 890-kilometer border line, which was created by Sir McMahon, came to be known as McMahon line. Now, the Chinese representatives, they initially agreed to this line, but eventually, subsequently, they refused to accept it. And the current stance of Chinese government is that they consider this McMahon line as illegal and they do not recognize its existence. Now, which is why this McMahon line and the eastern sector in particular have been bone of contention between the border areas of India and China. and the overall bilateral relations of India and China has been impacted because of this dispute. Now let us see what have been the various steps which are being taken by the Indian government to counter Chinese threat in the eastern sector and also in the western sector as well. First is that we are having full operational preparedness. That is, we are operationally fully prepared. Our armies are very well equipped. That is the first thing. And also, we have to mitigate threat to the vulnerable chicken neck area, that is the Siliguri corridor. Now, the chicken neck corridor or the Siliguri corridor is a small corridor which looks like a chicken's neck, and which is the area which connects the mainstream part of the India and your northeastern states. So the central India and the northeast states are connected with a narrow corridor which you call as chicken neck corridor or Siliguri corridor. So we have the capacity and capability to mitigate the threat in that region as well. Also, we are focusing on ISR, that is intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance. That is, we are having the capability to enhance our intelligence activities, to enhance our surveillance activities, and to enhance our reconnaissance activities. Now, we have also based a second Rafale fighter squadron in the area of Hasimara. Now, the area of Hasimara is close to the Sikkim, Bhutan, and Tibet tri-junction area, which is a very, very strategic and a very, very important location with respect to security purposes of our country. So we have based the second Rafale fighter squadron in that region. Also, Sukhoi 30 Mk1 jets, they have been deployed in the air bases of Tezpur and Chabua, which is there in Assam. Also, the Akash surface-to-air missile, they have also been deployed, plus the Bofors howitzer system. They have also been deployed in the region in order to ensure the safety of our borders. So that's all about India and China border issues. Now coming to the second topic of today, it is related to the basic structure so far. Now this very beautiful editorial has been written by Fali S. Nariman, who is an eminent jurist. So I would request everyone to read this editorial for once. And why this topic is important, basic structure, because in our GS paper 2, Indian Constitution historical underpinnings, basic structure have been mentioned directly, which is why it becomes very important for our mains examination. Now coming to the context. Now, according to Fali S. Nariman, the basic structure doctrine of India, it has been debated, and there is a reason why it has survived the test of time. Now we will understand how it has been debated over the years and how it has evolved over the past many years. Now, before understanding that, the first question which comes to our mind, or which should come into our mind, is what is this basic structure? So basic structure means the basic tenets, the basic principles on which the Constitution of India is based. So it is the basic structure means the basic principles, the basic ideals, the basic essence of the Constitution. So these are the basic features. If they are taken out from the Constitution, the essence of Constitution would be compromised. That is what your basic structure is. Now, Supreme Court has not given a formal definition of basic structure, and they have also not given basic tenets which comprise of the basic structure. But over the last many years, through its judgments, through its various pronouncements, Supreme Court has signified, or Supreme Court has presented, that all these things constitute our basic structure. For example, free and fair elections, secular nature of our democracy, or independent judiciary, judicial review, all these tenets, time and again, Supreme Court has reiterated as being the part of the basic structure. So the formal definition of basic structure has not been given by the Supreme Court of India. Right? Now let us understand the basic structure doctrine, how it has evolved over the last many years. See, first of all, let us start with 1951, when Shankari Prasad versus Union of India case happened. Now, in this Shankari Prasad versus Union of India, the Parliament's power of amending the Constitution under Article 368 was held to include the power to amend Part 3 containing the fundamental rights as well. right? Now in 1965, Sajan Singh versus State of Rajasthan, it upholded the parliamentary supremacy and its powers to amend any part of the constitution was upheld again. So it was upheld in 1951. In 1965, Sajan Singh versus State of Rajasthan, again the power was upheld. Right? Now, what happened in 1967, Golak Nath versus State of Punjab, in a complete reversal, the court ruled that the fundamental rights could not be amended by the parliament. So in first two cases, parliamentary supremacy can be seen. But in 1967, in Golak Nath versus State of Punjab, the court ruled that the fundamental rights could not be amended by the parliament unless another constituent assembly is formed. Now, it was again a major setback to the parliamentary supremacy which was enjoyed by the parliament before 1967. But what happened in 1971? The 24th constitutional amendment took place. Now, it said that Article 368 and Article 13 were modified to allow Parliament to unilaterally amend fundamental rights, overturning the Golak Nath ruling. So this 1971 24th Constitutional Amendment Act was passed, and it basically overturned the ruling given in Golak Nath versus State of Punjab case. Now, what happened in 1973? The most famous Keshwananda Bharati versus State of Kerala ruling came. Now here, the court ruled that all parts of the constitution, including the fundamental rights, it can be amended keeping the basic structure intact. So here came the doctrine of basic structure. Supreme Court said that the parliament is having the power to amend any part of the constitution, even the fundamental rights, but they should take care of one thing, that it does not abridge or it does not take away the basic structure, or it does not contravene the basic structure of our constitution. Right? Now, what happened in 1975? 39th Constitutional Amendment was there. Now, 39th Constitutional Amendment, it said that the elections of President, your Vice President, Prime Minister and Speaker, it placed beyond the scope of judicial review in the backdrop of emergency. So the elections of President, the election of Vice President, Prime Minister and Speaker was kept beyond the purview of judicial review. Now, what happened in 1975 in Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan case? Applying the basic structure doctrine, Supreme Court applied the basic structure doctrine for the first time, and it struck down the amendment which was made in the 39th Constitutional Amendment. So it struck down that particular provision which kept all these elections from the purview of, beyond the scope of judicial review. And it said in 1975, the court said that free and fair elections are the part of basic structure, right? So one thing got added to the basic structure, that is free and fair elections. Now again in 1976, 42nd Constitutional Amendment was there, where again Parliament's constituent power to amend was declared as limitless, right, in this 42nd Constitutional Amendment. Now what happened in 1980, Minerva Mills versus Union of India, the modifications which were made earlier in the Amendment Act, they were rejected by the court, and which clarified that the Parliament's power to amend the Constitution is limited in itself by the Constitution. So the Constitution of India in itself limits the power of the Parliament to amend the Constitution, right? So in all these years, this is how the doctrine of basic structure has evolved. Now this editorial also argues that time and again, this doctrine of basic structure have been tested on various counts. Now, it got into play, or it was propounded in 1973 by Keshwananda Bharati case, right? But what happened in November 10 of 1975, a 13-judge bench was set up by Chief Justice of India, A.N. Ray. Now, after that, the question for setting up this 13-judge bench was the power to amend the Constitution is restricted by the basic structure framework or not? That was the question for answering the 13-judge bench was 13 judge bench was basically constituted. So in order to answer this question, that whether the power of amendment of the constitution is restricted by the basic structure framework or not, this 13 judge bench was constituted. And detailed arguments were held for 2 successive days. Right? So in 10th of November 1975, this 13 judge bench was constituted and 2 days detailed argument were taking place. Now in morning of November 12, 1975, Chief Justice of India peremptorily dissolved the bench. That is with immediate effect. The bench got dissolved. Now in this editorial, it is also written that because the Chief Justice of India during that point of time realized that this basic structure doctrine would survive, which is why the bench got dissolved. Now in various other cases also, this basic structure doctrine have been reaffirmed by the Supreme Court. For example, in Indira Gandhi versus Rajnarayan case, 1975, when Article 329A subsection 4, it was declared unconstitutional and void. Now, this is the same subsection which talks about the elections of your president, vice president, prime minister and speaker to be kept out of the purview of judicial review. It was declared unconstitutional and void by the Supreme Court of India. Also in Minerva Mills versus Union of India case, 1980, this basic structure doctrine was upheld. In I.R. Coelho versus State of Tamil Nadu case as well, this basic structure doctrine was upheld. Now what happened when there was 44th Constitutional Amendment Act which was passed by the Parliament? It said that Article 20 and Article 21 can never be suspended even in the time of emergency. And the Parliament also reiterated because Article 21 and 20 are form of basic structure of the Constitution. So they constitute the basic structure of the Constitution, which is why they cannot be suspended even in the emergency. So here the Parliament also realized and it also accepted the importance of this basic structure doctrine. So that's all for this topic. Coming to the third topic of today, it is related to gig and platform workers. Now, why this topic is important? Because your Indian Economy General Studies Paper 3, this gig workers and platform workers and the conditions related to it is becoming important. Now, coming to the context of this topic. First of all, some states like Rajasthan have been legislating on the subject of gig workers and to ensure their welfare. Now, the question among us is, what are gig workers and what are platform workers? Okay, so first question is, what is a gig economy? Now, gig economy refers to an economy comprising of the gig workers. And who all are gig workers? Gig workers are the workers who are outside the traditional employer-employee relationship. For example, your freelancers. So the traditional employer-employee relationship where an employer would be there, employing 10 people, 20 people, 100 people who are working under the employer in an office. That is the traditional employer-employee relationship. But a person working out of it as a freelancer may be doing some coding, making some website, writing some content, publishing some content. All these things when a person is doing at the benefit of his or her home, that is what you call as a freelance. And freelancers are example of gig workers. Then what do you mean by a platform worker? Now you must have seen your Zomato drivers, the Zomato delivery agents or Uber drivers, Ola drivers, right? They are working for a particular online platform. And that platform is Zomato. That platform is Uber. That platform is Ola. That platform is Swiggy. So all these online platforms and the workers associated with them working at their own will, those workers will be called as platform workers who provide some specific service on online platforms. I hope it is clear. Now, there are 3 categories of workers. One is your blue-collared workers, basically who are doing the physical work. That is the laborers. Second is the white-collar workers who are doing the work related to their mind. That is, for example, teachers. Then is the red-collar worker. Now, government employees or the government workers are usually called as red-collared workers. And the difference between platform and non-platform workers that we have already discussed. Now, there is a code also, that is Code on Social Security 2020, which have been initiated by the central government to recognize the gig and the platform workers and to categorize them as a occupational category. Now, what are the benefits of being a gig worker or a platform worker? First of all, you get a lot of flexibility. You get to work from home. You get a lot of independence as well. Second is, since it is a skill-based job, so you will enhance your skills as well. Second is, mass jobs can be provided. A lot of freelancers can be there, right? The cost would be low because now you are not allowed to sit in the office, or you're not expected to come to the office. So the cost of office, the cost of electricity, the cost of equipments in the office, all those costs is left out. Then you get to gain a lot of experience as well. For example, you're not willing to work full time. You might work as a gig worker. You might work as a freelancer. You get some experience. After a few years, then you work as a full-time employee. Global reach, that is, you can work even for clients sitting in United States, even for the clients sitting in UK. They just need to hire an online platform, and from that online platform, they can connect to you and get their work done from you. But what are the various drawbacks being a gig worker or a platform worker? First is, the outcomes are inconsistent. Sometimes you might get the work, sometimes the work might not be there. There is no sense of social security in these kind of jobs. Plus, you feel sometimes isolated. Growth prospects are not that much. You might be doing same set of work for a lot many years. And sometimes the dissatisfaction also comes into play. Now, they are less reliable for organizations. Now, organization would rely more on an employee who is working at their office or to a gig worker. The organization would obviously be relying on a person who is working physically at their office. So the gig workers are often less reliable from the perspective of the organizations. Also, low trust. So organizations many times do not trust the gig workers or the platform workers a lot. So that is also one of the drawback. Now coming to the fourth topic related to trade restrictions. Now, recently, what government has done, they have put in various trade restrictions related to certain commodities. Why it is important? Again, our GS paper 3, Indian economy and issues relating to it have been mentioned, which is why this topic becomes important. Now, the context that government has imposed recently an export duty on parboiled rice. Now, what are trade restrictions? That is the first question. Now, trade between various countries constitutes of your exports and imports. Exports means the goods which are going out of our country to the other countries. Import means the goods which are coming to our country from the other countries. Now, when we are doing exports and imports of goods and services between two nations, we call it as trade. But when the government takes various measures to restrict that trade, that is known as trade restrictions. Now, in order to restrict that trade, government will put in various barriers. And the barriers which the government put, it is known as barriers to trade. Now, the barriers which the government put can be of two types. First, it can be of a tariff barrier. Second, it can be of non-tariff barrier. Now, tariff barrier very simply means any kind of barrier which involves a kind of a tax or a fee. For example, if government tells you that if you have to import certain products, you will have to pay certain level of tax on that product, certain level of fee on that product, a duty on that product in monetary sense, that barrier will be known as a tariff barrier. But if the government tells that, okay, you can import, we will not take any tax from you, but you can only import 50 items. That means government is imposing a quota. Government is not imposing a tax, but government is limiting the amount of goods which can come to our country, or the number of goods which can come to our country, right? That is a non-tariff barrier, which does not impose any tax, but still it acts as barrier to trade, right? Now then, what is a custom duty? Now, custom duty is a specific kind of tax which we have to pay when we import a good or we export a particular kind of a good. Now recently what government has been doing, government did it for basmati rice as well, government did it for onions as well. Now the government is doing it for parboiled rice as well. What is the specific exercise which the government is doing? Imposition of export duty. Now, naturally, what we have heard, that government wants to promote our exports, right? Government wants export promotion. So why will they impose a duty on our exports? Because when the government impose a particular tax on the exports would become expensive and other countries will not be demanding our products, right? Naturally, that is what is going to happen. Then why the government feels a necessity to impose your export duty on certain products? Let us see the reason. First is to combat inflation. Now let's say onions are there in our country, right? The supply of onion in itself is very short, but still people are exporting onions to other countries. Even though in our country, the onions price have increased and inflation is high. Now, in order to combat that inflation, government will impose an export duty in order to restrict your exports, so that onions stay in our country only and the supply of the onion increases so that the price of the onion goes down, right? Which is why, to combat inflation, the export duty might be imposed. Then domestic requirements, again in the case of onion, in order to meet the domestic requirements and the products do not go outside the country, because first we need to meet our domestic requirements, then only we should sell the product to other countries. So in order to ensure that, government might impose an export duty, that when you are exporting onions, you will have to pay a duty. Now, naturally, if you have to pay a huge amount of tax, you will not export onions. So our domestic requirements will be fulfilled. Then supply shortage again. In order to meet our domestic requirements, earlier domestic requirements were not met. Why? Because there was supply shortage. So to correct that, export duties are imposed. Now, whenever there is a bad harvesting season, right? Obviously, if the bad harvesting season is there, the amount of the produce of the rice would be low, the produce of the wheat would be low. Now, even if the produce is low, still if we are sending those produce to the other countries, naturally people in our country will not be getting those products. So in order to correct the economy in a bad harvesting season, in that case also this export duty can be levied. I hope this is very clear to all of you. Now coming to the last topic of today, it is related to Election Commission of India. Now why Election Commission is important? Because in our General Studies paper 2, appointment to various constitutional posts and responsibilities of various constitutional bodies have been mentioned. Now, why Election Commission is in news? See, there have been ongoing issues related to the appointment of Chief Election Commissioner and election commissioners, right? Now, in order to understand that, first of all, let us understand what is Election Commission of India. That is the first question which comes to our mind. See, Article 324 of the Constitution of India, it says that Election Commission is a permanent, independent, and a constitutional body. So, Election Commission of India is a permanent body. It is established by the Constitution, which is why it is a constitutional body, and its functioning is independent. So, it is an independent body as well. And what is the main purpose of setting up this Election Commission of India? To ensure free and fair elections in our country. Now, in order to ensure that elections in our country are free, they are fair, the Election Commission of India has been set up. Now, the Election Commission of India has the power of superintendence, has the power of direction and control of elections in our country. Control of what kind of elections? Are parliamentary elections, state legislative elections, the elections to the state legislature, the election of the President of India, and the election of Vice President of India. So in all these elections, Election Commission of India is having the power of superintendence, has the power to direct and the power to control these elections. Now let us study something about the composition of Election Commission. See, it's composed of a Chief Election Commissioner plus 2 election commissioners at the present time. And they are naturally appointed by the President of India. And Chief Election Commissioner serves as the Chairman of Election Commission of India. Now, there might be several instances where regional commissioners can be appointed by the President of India. And the service and tenure condition is decided by the President only. Now, coming to the issue of appointment, on which a lot of debate has been ongoing. Now, what happened was in 2023, Supreme Court of India gave a judgment that yes, election commissioner, that is the chief election commissioner and the election commissioners, they will be appointed by the president, but they will be appointed by the president on the aid and advice of a committee. And who will constitute that committee? The Prime Minister of India, the leader of the opposition, and Chief Justice of India. So based on the advice of these, a committee made by these three people, the president will then appoint the chief election commissioner and the election commissioners. Now, but what the government has did, it has initiated a bill, or it has tabled a bill in the Rajya Sabha, which says that only Prime Minister, which basically states that Chief Justice of India will not be involved in the appointment of election commissioner and chief election commissioner. The bill is yet to be passed. That is why in the present time, this Supreme Court judgment stands in itself. So in the present time, the Supreme Court judgment is valid, and it says that on the aid and advice of a committee which constitutes your Prime Minister, leader of opposition and Chief Justice of India, the President would be appointing Chief Election Commissioner and 2 election commissioners. I hope it is clear to all of you. Now, what happened was from 1950 to 1989, this Election Commission of India was a single member body. But in 1989, October of 1989, 2 more election commissioners were added. But again in 1990, it was made a single member body. And in 1993, again, 2 election commissioners were added. And from 1993 to the present 2023, the Election Commission constitutes of Chief Election Commissioner plus your 2 election commissioners. So Chief Election Commissioner and 2 election commissioners. Now they are having equal powers, equal salary and equal allowances as to a Supreme Court judge. And even the removal of the Chief Election Commissioner and the election commissioners is similar to a Supreme Court judge. Now, if the matter is there amongst these 3, that is Chief Election Commissioner and the 2 election commissioners, the matter is to be decided by majority among the 3. And the tenure of the Chief Election Commissioner and the election commissioners is 6 years or 65 years of age, whichever is earlier. So that's all about Election Commission of India. And thank you for watching this lecture. I hope it was fruitful to you. All the very best for your preparation.